We are going to hear from two very special young journalists. They are respectively the Young Journalist of the Year and the Student Journalist of the Year, Bridget Judd and Tess Economou. They won those awards at the Quill event in Melbourne this year, and as a part of that prize they both flew to Phoenix, Arizona in late June, where it was very hot, I'm told, to attend the International Reporters and Editors Conference, to sit down with like-minded young journalists from around the world to further improve their knowledge of journalism and, most importantly, apply it back here. So, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Tess Economou and Bridget Judd to talk about their experiences.
Thanks very much for that. So this year, Tess and I were fortunate enough to attend the IRE conference in Phoenix, Arizona in June, as Michael just mentioned. And I'd just like to start by thanking the Melbourne Press Club again and the family of David Wilson for giving us the opportunity to do this. It was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, so we do really appreciate that. So the IRE conference was held over about 3.5 days, and we had the opportunity to attend more than 150 panels, covering everything from one-on-one interviews and digging through data right through to podcasting and covering cold cases. I think to some extent heading into the conference, like a lot of people, I thought there would be a really big emphasis on the idea of fake news and I guess kind of dealing with the volatile political climate that's going on over there at the moment. And to some extent that was true, but I think more than anything there was a real emphasis on, I guess, putting that political rhetoric aside and just focusing on using public data and documents to really hold people to account. And for me, as a young journalist, that was a really eye-opening experience.
As Bridget mentioned, there were a variety of panels and demonstrations to choose from. You couldn't possibly attend every one. Knowing this, I tried to choose panels that would diversify my knowledge and, more importantly, be applicable back home. It became clear very quickly that Australian journalists do not have the same access to information that our American counterparts do. There also seems to be a prevailing belief that the public have the right to know. I was shocked to learn that the security tools session was being taken by a former FBI agent. Some of what he was teaching us was how to protect ourselves from the police. Because, as he told me, he believes journalism is fundamental for a functioning democracy.
So as Tess just alluded to, with so many panels, it really was impossible to try and get to them all. But I did have the opportunity to attend, some really incredible ones by amazing journalists, and I'd love to tell you all about them, but we don't have time, unfortunately. But in terms of professional development, I think, as Tess said, one of the biggest ones for me was digging with documents. And again, it was just really eye-opening to see the level of data that Americans actually have access to and what they're able to then do with that data. So this particular panel looked at all the new and different databases and apps being developed by journalists themselves, as well as the general public, to try and, I guess, streamline that data and get it out there. And so that covered everything from websites where you could tell, what kind of medications and how much your doctor was prescribing, and you could compare that to other doctors across the state. As well as paid databases where you could find the criminal history of someone that you're investigating, and not just their criminal history and background, but also the backgrounds of their wife or husband, their children if they're old enough, and any known associates, even if you didn't know they were friends. So that was eye-opening for me. I think in the context of Australia it might raise a few questions about privacy and things like that, but it was a really interesting take-home point just in terms of what more we could uncover here if we had access to those kind of resources. And also, I think, if we're going to be seeing more of that, because as I said, a lot of these resources were being developed by the journalists themselves. So it'd be interesting to see, I guess, in the future if there is that kind of appetite for that here.
Like Bridget, I too really enjoyed the digging into documents, particularly following the money, shining a light on dark money, because we were shown how to access databases and property records and discovery material in lawsuits and how to incorporate that into our reporting. I have a particular interest in national security and defence reporting, so I was quite pleased to find a panel on watchdogging the military. I took a lot away from it and learnt about how to make that initial contact and how to build relationships. There were also some really good story ideas that were just being handed out to us by the veteran journos there. I also really enjoyed a presentation on mastering the investigative interview, which was given by the Canadian producer Julian Scher. He said that there was no such thing as bad talent, only failure on behalf of the interviewer. It made me think about how I structure interviews and about what techniques I can begin to incorporate my style of interviewing. But what really resonated with me was advice given by the Boston Globe's Mike Resendiz. He told us that people are at the heart of the best stories. You should never assume that anyone will not talk to you. Everybody wants to talk, and it is our responsibility as journalists to figure out how to make them open up.
So another session I was really fortunate enough to attend and have been really excited about was turning your investigation into a podcast, which we're seeing a lot more of now with series like Trace and Phoebe's Fall. And if you haven't listened to them, I don't know, rethink your life, I think, because they're really good. So it was really interesting to hear from a lot of journos in the US, just in terms of, how to actually approach those kind of long-form series, not only just in crafting them, but how they're actually doing it across multiple mediums so they can get heaps of people interested in what they're selling. And I think one of the most interesting points out of that was that it's not something that's just being done by radio journalists anymore. In fact, most of the people at this panel, they worked in newspapers or they worked in TV. I think there was only one person there who actually worked in radio specifically. And it was interesting to see the ways they're working together as well. So there were newspaper journos teaming up with TV journos to do a podcast, which I don't know, you don't really see a lot of here. So that was really interesting and a really cool insight to have, particularly as we are seeing a lot more of these kind of series taking off back home, and I guess a gradual move towards that kind of medium here.
A month before the conference, IRE advertised a mentoring program. I applied for it and was matched up with a TV journalist. My mentor is currently working on documentaries, and we were able to talk about about experimenting with different storytelling techniques. It was really good to have that connection because I was invited to join his team at the IRE Awards luncheon. It was a fantastic vibe. I was in a huge room filled with journalists from over 20 different countries. And we were all there celebrating the great work being done in newsrooms across the world. The keynote address was given by Nicole Hannah-Jones of the New York Times Magazine. She spoke about her experiences growing up as a Black woman and the different perspective that gave her as a reporter. She raised the issue of the lack of diversity in American newsrooms, which was interesting to hear because it's an argument that is being made about our own workplaces back home.
Look, there is, plenty more sessions I'd love to bore you with, but I know we have to get a bit of a move on. So I guess in closing, again, I'd just really like to thank the Melbourne Press Club for giving me this opportunity, and also the family of David Wilson again, who has sponsored this award for several years, and I am very honoured to follow in his footsteps. Look, again, couldn't be more grateful, and thank you for the opportunity.
I too would like to thank the Melbourne Press Club and the Vizard Foundation for sponsoring my award. I've come back home very determined, and I'm very grateful for the opportunity that I've been given. Thank you.